Hello, my fellow builders, and welcome back to the channel. So we are looking at the Master Grade 2007 Turn A Gundam, one of the kits that has been on my list for many years, but I have not been able to get it until recently. I actually picked it up at a Black Friday sale from, I believe it was New Tech. Yeah, I got it for like $40, and that kit usually goes for about $60. I had to get it. So there were a lot of pieces that were very well detailed. I'm like, okay, I'm gonna have to do some custom detailing, but I'm also gonna have to enhance the already existing detail onto the armor plates and whatnot. And I thought, you know what? Let me try my hand at some simple scribing this time. So while enhancing the regular details on certain aspects, I decided to add in some of my own little custom flares here and there. And I think they turned out much better than I anticipated. This kit was a lot of fun to build. You got your standard white, you got your red, you got your bright red, you got a nice blue, and you got a lot of gray pieces for the thruster vanes for the legs. This kit is primarily white. It does have this cross section in the chest section that you can either have it blue or white. I chose to go with the blue route. I thought the white needed to just, chill a little bit. And then there's the cow. The cow, oh, that thing is just adorable. The manual, pretty slim, but pretty basic, and just a lot of details. And I'm actually really excited to get started. I was really excited to get started on this kit. I just had to sit back and look at it and also plan out how I'm going to tackle this kit. So the first thing I did was to focus on the details of the head. But before I did that, I actually went to eBay and bought myself some additional decals because the dry transfers, I wasn't sure how they were going to hold up. So, and I'm also not a fan of dry transfers, but going into the details, took my scriber and rescribed all of the details in the areas that actually had a lot of detail. So like the forehead had this little upside down A that's usually painted green. I wanted to make sure that really stood out once it was painted. And then all the little details surrounding it, I used my thinnest scriber possible. I believe it's a 0.01. And it brought out all the details perfectly, especially when I went to prime it. And the primer that I used the Mr. Surfacer 1500 black primer. That is becoming harder and harder to get lately, so I ended up getting 2 cans of it when I found out that it was on sale. Then I took 1500 grit sanding stick to frost over the eyes so you have a nice consistent glow from the LEDs. I ended up using 2 LEDs, warm chip sized LEDs from Evan Designs. You can find all your LED needs at evandesigns.com. They're based out in Colorado. Service is top notch. Their craftsmanship is really good. And on the one rare instance that I actually had an LED arrive to me, it was cracked and it wasn't usable. I emailed them, they shipped me a replacement free of charge. I would highly recommend that if you're getting LEDs, you test them all before you get started with your project. It's the last thing you want to deal with is a broken LED and you didn't realize it was broken. And with the rest of the parts on the head, well, the rest of the parts in general, I ended up sanding down all of the edges to soften them up, but as well as make sure to get rid of any seam lines from the manufacturing process. I find that to be a very super important step in the model building process, especially if you're going to be doing some custom painting. It just makes the kit look that much more clean and professional. Now for the part putting the head together, that was a real treat, but one thing I did not anticipate was the brightness level from the LEDs inside the yellow head cavity spot for the LEDs. It was bright, and it was a lot of bleeding through, despite the fact that the inside of the head was painted with a flat black to minimize any light bleeding through the plastic. But there was plastic bleeding, there was light bleeding through the cracks. So in order to fix that, I had to disassemble the head and then paint the topmost portion of the yellow part for the LEDs with a flat black so that it would not bleed through so much, and it turned out very well. Now with the weapon accessories, I wanted to switch gears and tackle the weapon accessories next, because I found those to be the most interesting weapon accessories I've ever seen. The shield between all the weapon accessories, between the beam sabers and the beam rifle, the G hammer, the shield was honestly my favorite portion of this kit's loadout. It really has a big presence. So what I wanted to do first was put together everything and see just how it turned out. Just see how it looked, see how it felt. And it needed a little detail work. So I went in with my scriber again, scribed out all of the details that were already there, and then sanded it down. And then I went in with my widest scriber and hollowed out about approximately 4 notches along the already existing groove lines at the very end, so that it just has its own, it just has a more pronounced identity, if you will. With the beam rifle, that had a lot of detail that needed to be brought out. So took my thinnest scriber again, went around all the curves, the bevels, the edges, the sharp lines, really just let the blade do the work. And then for any areas that were raised from the scribing, went in with the super glue, let it dry, and then sanded it back down, and it turned out great. Using the techniques I learned from the last video, from my Real Grade Wing Zero Christmas video, I was able to really turn up the dial on the highlight method of bringing out details. And for those of you who don't know what the highlight method is, it's basically when you take a black primer or a darker primer or a dark primer, I typically use black, and then you take a white and then you spray along the highest areas of the parts that you are highlighting. So with the shield and the beam rifle, I made sure that, whatever the highest points were and the beveled edges were, I concentrated the white in the highest point of it. And then with the color, once the white dried, go in with the color I desire. So with the shield, the shield was a nice vibrant red. So I had a perfect red for that. I ended up using it. The end result was far more superior than was far more prominent than I was expecting. And I just, for several hours, I just looked at it and I was just like, wow, that's really cool. Fun, just a note for those of you who are new to airbrushing, clean your airbrushes in between uses and make sure that the nozzles are free of any debris, because occasionally you will get spatter and that will ruin the paint job. And then you'll probably have to either sand it down or go over it with a second coat. But once I did all that, it was just perfect. It was open season to do all the decals. The beam rifle was a little tricky to put together because some of the instructions were just a touch vague, so I made a couple of mistakes. But even after that, once everything was painted, due to the design of this particular beam rifle, I ended up with some paint scraping along the stock area, the bump stock, the backside of the beam rifle. And some of that paint, even though I top coated it, it still scraped. So be careful with that. But given the overall age behind the lore, given the overall lore behind the age of this kit, it actually made sense that it would have some scratches in that area and along other areas of the mobile suit too, because the kit, I believe the suit is over 2,000 years old, something like that. I just know it's been buried underground for a very long time. And it was responsible for doing a factory reset on mankind's technology. So there you have it. I thought it actually fit quite nicely with that dynamic. Anyway, you are going to run into some paint scraping, but I think the overall look was still very, very much what I was looking for. Things just happen when you're not paying attention. And then a lot of times it just happens to work. Now with the shield, I ended up going in with some painting some details by hand to really emphasize the part separation, because I didn't want all the dark pieces to just be gunmetal or dark iron. So some of the edges were a dark or bright silver, I forget which. And it just made for some really unique part separation. But the shield by far is my favorite part of this kit. I freaking love that shield. The leg day. Again, going in with the highlight method, just highlight all of the most prominent portions of the parts that need to be highlighted. But the armor I treated just like the shield, started off at the center and then spread out, let it dry, and then come back with the second coat to really subdue the edges, but not completely wash them out. And otherwise you end up doing repeat work. I did do some additional scribing, some custom scribing on the upper thigh pieces as well, to just add some extra detail to it, because why not? This kit already has a lot of detail, and then there was just a lot of blank white spots. I'm just like, you know what, let me just break it up a little bit more. Some of the armor for the next to the thruster veins, I actually went with a mixed gray that I mixed personally, and it was a very good idea. Same technique, prime it, white in some areas for the highlights, and then go in with the gray, and it turned out wonderfully. I would like to emphasize that for new painters, people who are doing airbrush work or just painting in general, not everything needs to be painted. And I say that because you're gonna have to worry about excess friction when you're putting it in. You have the risk of actually stressing and or breaking something, and that's just not something you want to deal with. So just be mindful of what you're painting and where it's gonna go, and if it's gonna even be visible, because sometimes it really just is not necessary. The knee joints, for example, the legs are actually very stiff on their own. They did not need any type of additional support. So painting the knee joints was not necessary at all. As you can see here with the legs and the hips, everything turned out very wonderfully. The chest by far was probably the trickiest part to put together, because not only did going back to the painting of certain parts, it wasn't necessary. I went a little overboard in some areas, and it did cause me some problems. So like I said, be careful about painting everything. Some things don't need to be painted. But then also came the issue of wiring for the LEDs, because normally what I like to do is I like to have a thicker gauged wire going up through the main body, instead of having the main wiring hanging out the back. Unfortunately, due to the design of this particular kit, it was not possible, because I was worried about wire pinching, and there's just not a whole lot of, even though it looks like a whole lot of cavity space in there. You remember the missile pods, or the unit, or the storage unit for the cow. The storage unit for the cow is in the chest as well. So I had to make a choice, and unfortunately, it just was not feasible. So I'm like, you know what, it's fine. And I thought about actually wrapping around in the waist, but that would have also interfered with the torso bend, the torso flex. This thing actually has a pretty decent torso flex for such an old kit, and I did not want to compromise that at all. So although my wiring has improved over the years, I'm not particularly happy with this one. If there's another way to do it, if you guys have found another way to wire up the LEDs in this kit in the future, please let me know in the comments below. I appreciate it. And as far as painting some of the details on this kit, some of you guys have seen my short reels on YouTube as well. I use a nail detailing brush that my mother brought me for Christmas a couple of years ago. And these work far better than some of the paint brushes that I already have. This brand was called Yastero or Yasterd, and they come in a varying degree of length. I believe this is a 4mm length brush, and it was just perfect for getting in all those little details and getting them perfectly done. All I have to say for this kit is wow. I'm glad I was able to get my hands on it. This kit was a real blast to work on. And at some point I will be getting the Concept X, because it just makes sense to have it. Either the Concept X or the Golden Sumo, whichever one I can get first. All I gotta say is, dudes, this kit was a lot of fun. There were some stressful parts because the thruster vanes didn't exactly go well together at first, but it was a good kit. So if you can get it, I highly encourage you to do some custom painting with it and have fun. But as always, thank you all for the likes, the shares, and subscribes. Thank you to all the new subscribers who have come in and supported the channel. I really do appreciate it. I'm at 155 subscribers now. My next goal is to get to 200. So yeah, please remember to like, share, and subscribe. Like and share the video. Tell your friends about it. You know, especially if they're Turn A fans. This was a journey to be had, and thank you for rolling with me.